Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. It was not a direct linear process getting from NUS to McGill, but academia is just kind of like that. Where do I start? Well, thanks for having me, first of all. This is really exciting. And if there's one good thing to come out of a global pandemic, it's that we can have these international Zoom get-togethers. Which is really kind of exciting. I'm a bit homesick for Singapore, especially when it gets to be minus 30 in Montreal. So a bit of background, I did my first 2 degrees in Canada, and I'm from Canada. I'm from an island off the west coast of Canada. So I did a degree in my hometown, and then I did a master's degree in Toronto. And it was a professional program. So after I graduated, I went to Beijing, and I worked in an architecture firm for a little while, doing bids for the Olympics. Actually, it was right a few years before the Olympics. And I kept thinking I was unsatisfied with my career and my career direction. And so I kept thinking of other questions that I had in mind that I wanted to pursue. So I thought about PhD programs, and I really wanted to stay in Asia because my area of expertise is in Asia. I speak Indonesian, and I really wanted to be somewhere where I could do research in Indonesia. So after some research, I realized, okay, NUS is the top university in the region, and it was kind of a no-brainer for me to try to get a position at NUS. I traveled to Singapore, and I met with 3 different professors in different departments. And it was kind of like a firm no, a lukewarm, and a strong yes. So the strong yes was Lily Kong, Professor Lily Kong, who is a very famous, amazing professor. And she took a chance on me. And, you know, I wasn't prepared for a PhD program. I came from a professional program, and she saw something in me that she liked. She saw something in the topic that she liked, and she took a chance, and she accepted me into the program, and I got a scholarship. So that made all the difference. And I mean, NUS, it was about 2 hours by boat to my field site in the Riau Islands. So it was really an amazing experience for me to be based in Singapore and then travel regularly to my field site. And I compare that with students in Montreal who are doing research in, Southeast Asia or Africa or, other parts of the world, and they have to save up their money and, save up all their research questions, and they maybe go to the field once during their PhD, or maybe twice if they're really lucky. But I was able to go like 50 times. I was back and forth all the time. So it was really great for my research. Being based in Singapore was really exciting. As a Canadian, I'd been to Singapore many times before on little sort of backpacking trips through Southeast Asia. I did language study in Malaysia for an extended period, and in Java for about 9 months. So I would do visa runs back to Singapore, and it felt like a bit of a second home. So to be able to do a PhD there was really exciting. My experience at NUS was pretty amazing. It was really, my supervisor made my time there so incredibly productive. And I really owe my career to my supervisor and her incredible patience with me and really excellent mentoring. I got really good training in general, but I think one of the things I really appreciated about NUS was, of course, the professors are, world-class, extremely strong, but there are all these other institutes based at NUS that are well-funded and also have, extremely good resources, good libraries, etc. So the Institute for Southeast Asian Studies, which now I think is called Yusuf Ishak something, has an amazing library. It's a think tank based right on campus. The Asia Research Institute is incredible. And for me as a PhD student, it was really exciting to have global scholars kind of cycling through these institutes and giving talks. So I was attending talks all the time, several times a week at NUS, which kind of broadened my research network. And when I went to apply for jobs later, it really helped. let's see, the stipend was excellent at NUS, I have to say. We didn't have to apply for rounds of funding, and it took away a lot of stress. And I see my own students go through this because they have to apply for grants, and it takes something like 7 months for them to get the results. So it's a real source of anxiety for our students, which I didn't have at NUS, although I didn't have any grant writing experience when I left NUS. So there's sort of pros and cons. Because it's an international hub, you know, there are discount flights, which I took advantage of from Singapore. I went to Vietnam, Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, etc., Cambodia. So it was a really exciting time to be a graduate student, but not feel like you're just sort of starving and living in a basement, depressed, writing your thesis. And then finally, I think one of the things that I remember most about my experience was the canteen culture. We don't have this at McGill or any Canadian universities or American universities. The canteens are fantastic. They're incredibly cheap. So you get good hot food every day. You don't have to pack a lunch. So we pack a sandwich and have this depressing cold sandwich at our desks every day here. But what was the best about canteen culture is everyone goes. The professors, the administrators, the undergrads, grad students, staff, everyone goes. And so I had the experience of having lunch with almost every professor in my department at one time or another, because we're just there at the same time and share a table. So that was really enriching and one of the great things I really appreciate about NUS. So when I was doing my PhD, I was not very strategic. I wasn't really thinking of life after my PhD, but at some point my supervisor said, you probably want to publish something. So I did. I worked hard to get a couple things published just to plan for my next steps. And I actually changed topics from my PhD to my postdoctoral research. I completely changed topics because I started getting interested in new cities built from scratch. And that was from living in Singapore and being exposed to Putrajaya in Malaysia. So I traveled to Putrajaya a few times to kind of scope out postdoctoral research topics. And I developed a proposal to study Putrajaya, which at that time no one had published anything about it. It was this sort of mysterious new, like Brasilia in the middle of Malaysia. And no one was writing about, no scholars were writing about it. So I applied for postdoctoral funding at MIT and they accepted it. And so I moved to Boston from there, and I was in Boston at MIT and Trinity College in Connecticut and teaching at various universities in the Boston region for a number of years. And that was a really great experience. And it really taught me that, yeah, you have to be a bit nimble in the academic job market. I realized my PhD topic was a bit obscure. And although it was interesting, it was not that marketable. And my PhD topic was much more marketable. And so I had to learn, it was a steep learning curve. I had to learn a whole new literature. But I think that's what got me, you know, more academic positions. So I got some teaching experience, and then I also took some contracts with TripAdvisor and the UN. So I was starting to think of maybe not being in academia anymore. That was my sort of plan B. But then I got an opportunity to come back to Canada and work at McGill University. And you know, it sounds, when I tell a story, it sounds like this very sort of seamless, happy story of a really excellent postdoc leading to another postdoc, leading to teaching positions, leading to McGill. And, you know, you don't, on the CV, you don't see all the positions that you don't get, that you apply for and you never hear back from, or you get shortlisted and you get an interview and you don't get the position. So it takes an enormous amount of tenacity and kind of belief in yourself to kind of forge ahead. I graduated during the global economic crisis. And so it was 2008 when I finished my PhD, and I was at MIT, so I was safe. But then, you know, there were hiring freezes. The entire state of California had a hiring freeze on their university system. So it was, looking back, it's a lot like what students are facing today with the pandemic and all the repercussions there. So I guess my advice would be to have a plan A through G, basically. Academia, I think 7% of people who do PhDs actually end up in academia. So I'm one of the lucky ones, but I also did non-academic work between my PhD and my position at McGill. So sort of staying flexible was really key for me. Let's see, other advice I have is find a supervisor who supports you and who will go to bat for you, because it's a very intense, close relationship that you build with your supervisor, and you want to make sure that that is a relationship of trust and respect. They can open doors for you. They're going to be writing letters of reference for you. So it's really important to have someone that you have a good rapport with. I think when I was a PhD student, I was not very strategic about how to groom myself for the job market. So I had this very obscure topic, and I wasn't really getting tons of teaching experience at NUS. I think that was one of the drawbacks. But I couldn't figure out at the time what would make me hireable. And now that I know what would make you hireable is find teaching experience at all costs. You just have to have some teaching experience before you can be considered for a faculty position, but also figure out what would you look like in an academic department that you're targeting. What introductory courses would you teach? What senior level courses would you teach? How do you brand yourself as sort of an expert in which subfields? And I didn't really understand that positioning at the time. Other tips is just publish. You just have to publish now. That's the sad reality. Don't go into a PhD program unless you're prepared to publish. And it's a lot of work. It's more work than you think it's going to be when you start your PhD. Just the revision process, it's really tough, but it's doable. If you got accepted into a PhD program, you're capable of publishing. Yeah, and that you need a supervisor that can help you and mentor you through the process. So for your first article or two, it really helps if your supervisor can help you with, editing, giving you some feedback and suggestions, etc. I think I'm going to end there. I think I've said all the things that I wanted to say, but I'm happy to take questions if anyone has any.
Great, thank you, Sarah. I think that was really insightful, and actually also, I think in many ways you covered, every sort of like I think you're absolutely right. I think the path, many students take can be very diverse and also quite nonlinear in, sort of starting out in graduate school and all the way culminating in either an academic or a non-academic job. Katrina has a question, and so I think she's here and she can ask a question in person. Katrina, are you there?
Yeah, I've been given the power of unmuting. I just had a question regarding the proposals that we send for applications. If you have any advice on writing the proposal, especially if we're worried that maybe our research question is too big or not really feasible within a 3-year period of time. I think if it's hard to know always from the beginning if it's manageable in the time given for a PhD. Thanks.
Well, the PhD's 4 years, so you can relax. It's not 3, 4 to 5. I mean, some people take 5. I took 4. I took just under 4. The key is really finding your supervisor at this stage. Like if you're thinking of applying, find someone who's willing to work with you, and then they'll read a few drafts of your proposal. At least that's what I did with my supervisor, and that's what I do with any PhD student or even master's student that I think about taking on at McGill. We'd kind of Zoom or have a chat and talk about ideas. Then they come up with a draft proposal. Then I edit that proposal and we kind of go back and forth. And so I'm instrumental in making this proposal as good as possible. And your supervisor or your future supervisor can sort of help frame it and like sort of get the right research questions that aren't too huge and aren't too narrow. So it's really finding someone you trust and is willing to work with you to help the application be as strong as it can be.
So I think it varies sometimes a bit across fields. So I think that definitely works in some of the departments in FASS. The other thing, of course, is that if you don't manage to identify a supervisor, or you might not be based in Singapore, or you may not have met some of these professors yet. One thing to also note is that the PhD proposal, in a sense, you're not bound to it. I think what many of my colleagues will say is that what they're looking for really are like, whether your interests are a match for potential faculty members in the department, whether or not you write well, whether or not you sort of think like a social scientist or someone who's interested in the humanities or whichever field that you're applying for. And it's a bit less about the exact topic and whether it's feasible, as opposed to whether or not you have this idea that you could, they can see the passion in your writing for something that you want to pursue. I think what Sarah said about working with the supervisor, that's super critical once you get to NUS in terms of trying to refine the project that you're working on, and that's what the supervisor is there for. So I think students can worry a lot less about kind of the actual sort of very specific meat in the proposal sometimes, but rather to be able to convey kind of like the broader project idea that might fit with sort of the research interest in the department or faculty that you might be applying for.
Yeah, that's true. And my actual PhD evolved a lot from the proposal. I think the proposal was, a bit not totally what I ended up doing. But I guess I'm thinking from the perspective of McGill, which is very different actually from NUS. We can only hire students if we pay them. And so all the funding comes from our own grants. So it has to be sort of tied to our work a little bit more. But you're right, there's sort of a pot of money at NUS that is glorious. And it's very liberating, I think, for both faculty and for PhD students.
Yeah. No, it's nice that you mentioned that point, because I did my graduate training outside of Singapore. And when I came to NUS, I think I was also extremely surprised by the fact that, faculty members here actually get a lot of access to internal grants that you don't actually have to do a lot of work for to get that money, as opposed to like if you're based in the US or Canada, where you would typically have to go through months of grant writing before you get that money. So I think for students who are present, I think Sarah's right. There are instances where there might be a specific project that's looking to hire it's looking to kind of to get a PhD student, in which case then you would typically work with the supervisor to actually refine a proposal that fits with their research interest. But there is also typically at the faculty level and at the university level, sort of like what you mentioned, pots of money that are available to support students who can then actually come in and then look for a supervisor as well. So there are numerous modes of recruitment that we have. So again, I think I implore you that, if you have a question, if you have a interest in the program, do make contact with the faculty, do make contact with the department, and also feel free to make contact with individual or potential supervisors to assess, potential fit and interest. So, yeah. So
and also just one final thing, I think your supervisor is on your team and represents you at the faculty level. And so if there's any little fellowships or awards, your supervisor will put your name forward, and you want someone who believes in you. So my supervisor put me forward for many awards. I got a presidential scholarship when I was at NUS for 2 years, which was amazing. She put my thesis up for some award, which it didn't win, but she was willing to do the work to try to showcase me and set me up for success. And looking back, I realized how much work she put into my success, which I really appreciate.
So I think we have one more question, and I know we're running a little over, but if you don't mind, maybe we'll take this as the last question before we conclude the evening session. Is that okay, Sarah?
Sure.
Okay, so the question is how should we prove our competence during the PhD application process, in the event that the student doesn't have, relevant experience?
Relevant experience in what?
So I think the question is more like, in case you don't have relevant experience in that specific field, like, so.
Oh, you just have to fake it till you make it.
I mean,
you just have to read, and you just have to be confident that you can become an expert in your field. And so you just read until you become an expert. And so at the end of your PhD, you should be the world expert in your topic. There should be no one else that knows your topic as well as you. One quick anecdote, my supervisor, she was very kind and generous and really fantastic. And she told me very gently, my methods chapter was probably the weakest in my thesis. And that sent a very strong signal that my methods was garbage, basically. It was really bad. It was her nice way of saying that. And so I basically I went to the NUS library and I read every social science qualitative methods book in there. And at the end of it, I wrote a paper and published it in a journal called Area, which is a top tier journal, and it's my highest cited paper. So this is like, you just have to have some grit and confidence and just go for it.
And that was great advice too, at a very timely point, it seems. So, it's a great anecdote. Well, thank you very, very much for that really interesting and inspiring talk. And it's great to see that you're doing very well in Canada, and stay safe. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks so much.
And I think this brings us to the end of the evening session, and also the end of the overall session for the NUS eOpen House. Carolyn, did you want to say a few words, or shall I conclude on your behalf?
Yeah, I think you can conclude.
Okay, all right, great. So, well, thank you all of you for joining us, for this session, as well as for all the day's events. I want to also say a huge thank you to all the panelists and all the faculty and students who have also come forward to share their experiences. I hope that from today's events, you kind of get a little bit of a glimpse of what the NUS culture is like. I've been here for about 10 years myself. I'm Singaporean, but I did actually most of my graduate education overseas. And I would say that really, on some very fundamental level, I think NUS is a great place. It's very collegial, and there is really a lot of interaction across the different faculties and schools that really kind of form this really nice basis, both for a community, for a faculty member, as well as a place where you can really come to do meaningful research. Funding is, for a state university is very nice, and I think more importantly is that there is sort of a very strong culture for research, innovation, and really trying to kind of do the best for our students. So I hope you'll seriously consider us as a place that you might want to start your potential graduate career at. And I think some of you over the course of today may have come up with some questions that you didn't get a chance to answer. So again, please feel free to talk directly with faculty and departmental reps at the PhD eOpen House Exhibition Hall. Feel free to email us if you have any sort of questions. And also, like I mentioned earlier, feel free to make contact with the department or faculty that you're interested in, as well as to individual supervisors, with potential research plans that you might have. Or if you happen to be in Singapore, feel free to drop them a note to sort of say, I happen to be on campus, or, in these days you kind of meet online more. Try to arrange for a time to chat with them. I think faculty members are always very, very open to trying to sort of share their own experiences and research interests with potential students. So these are sort of all various avenues that you should consider. With that, I want to say thank you again, and good night.